I was ecstatic, standing in what was supposed to be the doorway to our future. But as Caleb dropped the bombshell that his parents were moving in, that doorway felt more like a trapdoor beneath my feet. "Surprise!" Caleb exclaimed with a grin, his arms wide as if expecting praise. "My parents are going to move in with us. Won't that be great?" I stood there, stunned. This was the first I'd heard of it. The joy I'd felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a sinking feeling in my gut. We'd just finished building our dream home. I'd poured my entire life savings into it, working long hours to afford the perfect place for Caleb and I to start our new life together. After a whirlwind romance, we'd gotten married in a small ceremony 6 months ago. While Caleb's laid-back demeanor balanced my driven intensity, I sometimes worried we wanted different things. Small comments he'd made now felt like red flags. How he'd love his mom's home cooking again, how he missed seeing his parents every day. I dismissed them as sweet sentiments, but now feared they hinted at expectations I didn't share. My parents had been wholly supportive, thrilled to see their only daughter so happy. But Caleb's parents, that was another story. From our first meeting, his mother Eleanor's piercing stare and pursed lips told me she didn't approve. His meek father Don just nodded along with pursed lips. Caleb rambled on, oblivious to my dismay. "We have that huge guest suite, it's perfect. Mom's been dying to spend more time together, and Dad could use some looking after. This solves everything." I blinked hard, trying to process his words. "You already invited them to live here?" "Well, yeah," Caleb shrugged. "I figured you'd be on board. I'm so excited." He pulled me in for a congratulatory hug. I stood frozen, unable to return the embrace. My mind raced. How could he have assumed this was okay? Ambushing me like this, on today of all days? I pulled back, looking Caleb in the eyes. "Don't you think this is something we should have decided on together?" Caleb's smile faded at my tone. "I mean, they're my parents, and we have room for them. What's the issue?" I gaped at him. Was he serious? "The issue is that this is our home that I spent years saving for. You don't just get to invite whoever you want to live here without asking me." "Whoa, calm down," Caleb said, raising his hands defensively. "I figured you'd be happy about this. They're going to be your family too now." My blood boiled at his flippant response. I dreamed of a sanctuary with my new husband, full of laughter and intimacy. Instead, Caleb seemed determined to let his parents invade the space I'd sacrificed so much for. "I agreed to build a home with you, Caleb, not with your parents," I said bluntly. "We've been married for 6 months. Don't I deserve some say in my own home?" Caleb's nonchalant facade finally cracked. "Come on, don't be like this," he pleaded. "They're getting older. They can't handle being alone. Don't make me choose between you and them." I froze as his words sank in. He was guilt-tripping me, making me out to be the bad guy for not immediately agreeing to his thoughtless decision, for wanting a say in the home I'd poured my life into. In that moment, I realized that dream home suddenly felt more like a gilded cage, one designed not just for Caleb and I, but now under the watchful eyes of his parents. Surveillance masked as family togetherness. Maybe I didn't know Caleb as well as I thought, but I knew myself, and I refused to be trapped. The next few days crawled by in tense silence. I busied myself with minor tasks, avoiding eye contact whenever I passed Caleb in the halls of our not-so-dream home. The joy I'd felt moving in just weeks before had curdled into resentment. I knew Caleb's parents would be arriving any day, invited without my consent to stay for who knows how long. The thought of Eleanor and Don invading my sanctuary made my skin crawl. But Caleb refused to discuss it further, shutting down any attempt I made to set boundaries. "Can we talk about this?" I asked as we washed dishes together one night. "I'm not comfortable with your parents staying indefinitely. Maybe we could compromise on a trial period first?" Caleb sighed, not meeting my eyes. "You're totally overreacting," he mumbled. "Just give them a chance. They're excited to help us get settled." I nearly shattered the plate I was scrubbing. Help us? More like control and criticize us if Eleanor had anything to do with it. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Caleb's face lit up. "They're here." He dried his hands and rushed to let them in. I followed slowly, heart sinking. There went my sanctuary. I heard Eleanor's shrill voice from the foyer. "Oh, what a unique little house this is. So modern. I could never live somewhere so cold and boxy, could you, Don?" Dawn just grunted in reply. My hands clenched. I designed every inch of this home after years of effort and research. I'd chosen the clean lines and contemporary style specifically. This was my dream, not theirs. Caleb and his parents came around the corner then. Eleanor frowned at my yoga pants and t-shirt. "Well, don't you look comfortable?" she said with a thin smile. Caleb shot me a warning look. I forced a pleasant tone. "Welcome. We're still unpacking, so please excuse the mess." "Oh, think nothing of it," Eleanor waved dismissively. "We're family now, after all. No need for formalities." I highly doubted she actually felt that way. I turned to Caleb, avoiding Eleanor's judgmental gaze. "Why don't you show them to the guest suite so they can settle in?" Caleb led them down the hall, Eleanor critiquing the barren, neutral decor along the way. As their voices faded, I slumped against the wall and took a deep breath. This was only day one. Surely I could make it work somehow. Caleb was my husband, and they were his parents. Over the next few days, that optimism crumbled. Eleanor criticized everything, from my avant-garde interior design to my immodest lounge clothes to my exotic cooking. Don trailed after her, not saying much, but occasionally chiming in with his own disparaging remark. They commandeered the kitchen, taking over meal times. They helped themselves to anything in the fridge. They left messes without cleaning up. The structured routine Caleb and I had started establishing was utterly disrupted. My attempts to discuss boundaries only led to arguments. Caleb accused me of shirking my wifely duties of keeping his parents happy. He dismissed my feelings, saying I just needed time to warm up to them. The final straw came late one night when I overheard hushed voices in the kitchen. I crept closer, realizing it was Caleb and his parents. "You need to get her under control," Eleanor said sharply. "She has no respect for family." Caleb sighed. "I'm trying, Mom. This move was supposed to help her fall in line. She resisted at first, but I think she's coming around." I reeled, mouth falling open in shock. Fall in line? This had been their plan all along, to manipulate me into total compliance through this forced living situation. Rage roared through me. I had to take back control, starting by kicking these toxic leeches out of my home. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a pressure cooker about to blow. After what I'd overheard, any shred of optimism I had about making this work had vanished. I found Caleb in the kitchen and steeled myself. "We need to talk. Now." Caleb frowned, glancing around. "Keep your voice down. My parents are still sleeping." I crossed my arms. "Fine, but we're having this discussion." I led him out to the back deck and took a deep breath. "This isn't working. You need to tell your parents they have to move out." Caleb's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? They just got here. You can't just kick them out." My anger swelled. "This is my house that I paid for, and if I don't want them here, they can't stay." Caleb stepped closer, looming over me. "You're being ridiculous. They're family now, whether you like it or not." I refused to be intimidated. They have treated me horribly since the moment they arrived, criticizing my home, my clothes, my cooking. "Nothing is good enough for your Royal Highness Eleanor," I snapped. Caleb scowled. "You're exaggerating. They're just trying to help you be a better wife and homemaker. I thought you'd appreciate the advice." I gaped at him. "Help me? They've destroyed our home dynamic and undermined me at every turn." Before Caleb could argue further, we heard the back door slide open. Speak of the devil, it was Eleanor. "There you are," she said to Caleb, ignoring me completely. "Your father needs help programming the TV remote. This modern technology is so needlessly complicated." Caleb shot me a warning look. "I'll be right there, Mom." Eleanor nodded, then wrinkled her nose at me. "Oh, Jenna, dear, you look so unkempt this morning. Didn't you have time to put yourself together?" I was still in pajamas with messy hair at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. Not that I owed her any explanation about my choices in my own home. I forced a smile. "Just focused on some other priorities first. Please excuse my appearance." She shook her head. "A wife should always present herself properly. Don't you agree, Caleb?" "Of course, Mom," Caleb replied. My fists clenched. I wanted to scream. After Caleb left with her, I took some deep breaths. Then I heard noises from down the hall. They were rifling through my office. I rushed over to find Eleanor sitting at my desk, Dawn digging through my filing cabinet. "What are you doing?" I demanded. They looked up, startled. "Oh, we were just looking for the takeout menus so we could order lunch," Eleanor said casually. I strode over and slammed the filing cabinet shut, barely missing Don's fingers. Get out! My voice was ice. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Now, that's no way to speak to your in-laws. We were simply... I said, get out! I shouted. This is my office, my private space. You have no right to go through my things without permission. They scurried out, grumbling under their breaths about my shrill tone and disrespect. As they left, I caught a glimpse of a paper on my desk, my bank statement. Boiling rage flooded me. They had been snooping through my financial records. These toxic, manipulative leeches had to go. Today. I had tried reason, compromise, patience. None of it mattered. They believed I was an obstacle in their plan to control Caleb and get their claws further into my life. Well, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I was done being nice. I would do whatever it took to cut them out of my home and my marriage for good. After the office invasion, I'd had enough. The time had come for drastic measures. I was kicking them out. I found Caleb in the living room and asked to speak privately. He reluctantly followed me to the bedroom. Your parents need to leave. Today, I said bluntly. Caleb's eyebrows shot up. You're insane if you think I'm kicking my parents to the curb just because you can't get along with them, Caleb spat. I held firm. Either they go willingly or I'll have them forcibly removed for trespassing. They have no rights here. This is my house. Caleb's face reddened with anger. You would really have my elderly parents thrown into the street? What kind of heartless bitch are you? His cruel words stung, but I didn't let it show. They're manipulative liars. All they've done is undermine and control me since they got here. I overheard you all conspiring to get me in line. I'm done being a pawn in your twisted family game. Panic flashed across Caleb's face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to uncover their scheme. You're imagining things, he scoffed. They just want what's best for us. I rolled my eyes. The only thing your parents care about is controlling you and isolating you from me. If you can't see that, you're more delusional than I thought. Caleb's lips curled in a sneer. Careful, Jenna. Keep running your mouth and you'll force my hand. I stood tall. Go ahead and play your hand, because unless they leave today, mine will be an eviction notice. His eyes bored into me, jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might get violent, but instead he took a breath and lowered his voice. Okay, let's say they did leave. Then what? His tone turned mocking. You get your perfect little sanctuary back? Your precious home unsullied by my family? I didn't respond, waiting for him to get to the point. Here are your options. Caleb stepped closer. 1, you accept my parents living here gracefully. 2, I divorce you and take half. We sell this place and you start over. I reeled as his ultimatum sunk in. He would actually threaten to destroy our marriage, just to keep his toxic parents around. Any love I'd once felt for him dried up in that moment. Fine, I said icily. I'll have the divorce papers ready by tomorrow morning. Shock spread across Caleb's face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to call his bluff. Too bad for him. I refused to be manipulated any longer, not even by my spineless excuse for a husband. I grabbed my purse and strode to the door. Caleb scrambled after me. Where are you going? He demanded. To contact my lawyer. I slammed the door behind me, blocking out his sputtering protests. As I pulled out of the driveway, an immense feeling of relief washed over me. I was getting my life back. Over the next few hours, I talked to my lawyer and realtor. My name was the only one on both the mortgage and deed. I had full legal claim to the house. Financial accounts were separate, with no communal assets. Caleb had no leverage. His tantrums and threats were empty. The only tie binding us was a flimsy marriage certificate, and that would soon be shredded. I returned that evening with steely calm. Caleb's parents had conveniently made themselves scarce. Caleb appeared, contrite. Look, can't we talk about this? He pleaded. I overreacted earlier. Don't do anything drastic. I held up the manila envelope from my lawyer. The only talking now will be between our attorneys. Right, I'm filing for divorce first thing tomorrow. Caleb's face fell. For a moment I almost pitied him. He'd gambled on my compliance and lost everything. But I refused to be swayed by sentimentality. Not when my home, independence, and self-worth were at stake. He reached for me, desperation in his eyes. Jenna, please. I stepped out of reach. They'll need to be gone before the sheriff arrives to escort them out. I'll be staying in a hotel until then. Without another glance, I walked out. The dream home Caleb had lured me into was now just a crime scene. It was time to start fresh, without my failed marriage and without the in-laws from hell. The next few days passed in a blur. I split my time between my lawyer's office and the hotel, ironing out divorce details and avoiding the toxicity at home. My phone blew up constantly with calls and texts from Caleb, ranging from desperate pleading to vicious insults. His attempts to manipulate me back under his control only steeled my resolve further. I returned to the house once to check their moving progress. As expected, Caleb's parents were still clinging on. "You can't just throw us out with no place to go," Eleanor shrieked as I did a walkthrough. "I gave you fair warning," I said calmly. "You had plenty of time to make arrangements." Don scowled from the couch. "We sold our house to move here with our son, as he promised we could. Now where will we go?" I shrugged. "That's not my concern anymore. Staying here was never part of the deal." I left them ranting and went to find Caleb packing up the bedroom. His eyes were bloodshot, hair disheveled. The cocky arrogance he'd once radiated was gone. "Jenna, be reasonable," he pleaded. "We can work this out. Just tell me what you want." I paused, looking him over. The man I'd fallen for seemed like a stranger now. "What I want is for this toxic situation to end. My lawyer will be in touch." I started to leave when Caleb suddenly grabbed my wrist, hard enough to bruise. For the first time, I felt afraid. "Don't do this, Jenna," he hissed through clenched teeth. "You have no idea what you're starting here." Adrenaline coursed through me. I wrenched my arm from his grip. "Threaten me again, and you'll only make things worse for yourself," I said coldly. Then I walked away without looking back. Soon enough, moving day arrived. With police on standby, the hostile holdouts were finally extracted from my home. Caleb glared daggers at me as they drove away in defeat. I stood on the front steps, surveying the mess they'd left behind. Caleb had clearly trashed the place in spite and anger, but the feeling of peace and freedom was worth any amount of cleanup. As I began tidying up, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. I answered hesitantly, wondering if it was another bullying tirade from Caleb, but instead a cheerful female voice responded. "Hi, is this Jenna? Caleb's wife?" I bristled at being identified that way now. "Soon-to-be ex-wife, yes." "Oh." She sounded surprised but not unkind. "I'm so sorry, I hadn't heard. I'm Lucy, chair of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association Board. We wanted to check in on the situation." As she explained further, I realized word had spread about my in-law infestation, and the community was on my side. Lucy said neighbors had observed their rude, entitled behavior around town. Everyone was appalled when they learned of their unwanted presence in my home and the abusive way Caleb had enabled them. "You're so brave for standing up to them," Lucy said supportively. "Please let us know if you need anything. We want you to feel safe and welcome here." I was touched by the unexpected compassion from relative strangers. After feeling isolated and trapped for so long, knowing others saw the injustice of what I'd endured was validating beyond measure. Over the next few days, the neighborhood outrage became even clearer. I noticed people glaring when Caleb came to pick up more of his things. Friends he'd introduced me to stopped returning his calls. No one offered him sympathy or support. At first he seemed oblivious, ranting to me about their disloyalty. But soon enough, the shunning seemed to wear him down. I caught him sitting in his car down the street one day, head in hands. For once, he seemed to grasp the impact of his actions. Not just on me, but on how the whole community now viewed him. I almost felt bad seeing him so despondent. Then I remembered the months of manipulation he'd put me through. He'd brought this social exile on himself. As I reclaimed my home and independence, Caleb was losing everything he'd tried to build here, all because he'd gambled on my obedience to his family's cruelty. He was about to learn a hard lesson about karma's payback. After finally reclaiming my home, I settled back into a comfortable routine. The constant tension, headaches, and knots in my shoulders dissipated. For the first time in months, I could relax completely in my own space, until one night when a furious pounding on the front door jolted me upright. I crept to the window and peered out cautiously. My heart dropped. It was Caleb, with his irate parents in tow. "Open up, Jenna," Caleb yelled, still pounding. "You can't lock us out of our own home." I steeled my nerves and opened the door a crack. "I told you, this is my home now. You have no right to be here." Caleb tried pushing his way in, but I held firm. Eleanor clicked her tongue disapprovingly over my shoulder. "Don't be petty, Jenna," she scolded. "We left some things behind. Let us in to collect them." I shook my head. "I'll have them delivered to you. Now please leave before I call the police." Caleb snarled, shoving hard against the door. I couldn't hold him back. They streamed in as I stumbled back. "You can't keep me from my own house," Caleb shouted, getting in my face. "We had an agreement, remember? My parents live here or no marriage." Heart pounding, I stood up straighter. I refused to cower in my own domain. "The agreement is void now that we're getting divorced," I said firmly. "And I have full legal rights to this property. So I'm telling you one last time, get out of my house." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "You young people and your melodrama. You'll come to your senses eventually. Now step aside and let us by." They tried pushing past me towards the bedrooms. Adrenaline flooded my veins. I wasn't about to surrender control again. In one swift motion, I pulled out my phone and hit the panic button app linked to the security system, triggering the blaring alarm. Caleb and his parents clamped their hands over their ears, shouting in protest. I seized the moment of distraction to corral them back towards the entryway. Just then, flashing blue and red lights appeared outside as police vehicles pulled up, alerted by the alarm. The commotion must have also drawn the neighbors' attention, as heads started poking out of windows and doors down the street. 2 officers approached with stern expressions. "We received a panic alert from this residence. Is there a problem here?" Caleb tried to respond, but I stepped forward first. "Yes, officers, I need your help. My soon-to-be ex-husband and in-laws are trespassing after I've asked them multiple times to leave." I showed them the divorce paperwork and restraining order application. The officers nodded in understanding. "You 3 need to come with us," they said to my stunned intruders. Caleb protested loudly about it being his house, too, as they escorted the defiant trio out. Before the door closed, Eleanor shot me a chilling stare. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding with adrenaline, but I held her gaze steadily. I wasn't about to show fear or weakness now, not after everything I'd overcome. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I would defend it against anyone seeking to control or destroy it. Or me. As the police cars pulled away, I turned to see my neighbors congregating, offering smiles and thumbs up. Lucy even raised her glass in a mock toast before heading back inside. For the second time, I'd faced down my tormentors. But this victory was even sweeter, knowing my neighbors had my back. I shut the front door, leaving the chaos outside. The police could handle Caleb and his parents now. I'd take back command of my inner peace. After all, karma had my side. And her payback wasn't finished yet. In the weeks after the showdown, I anxiously awaited retaliation from Caleb and his parents. But instead, what I heard surprised me. Rumors spread that Eleanor and Don had been rejected by every senior living facility they applied to, due to past behavioral issues. Forced to move far from family, they were isolated and miserable. Caleb's graphic design business began struggling too. Former clients pulled projects and refused to give referrals. His social media pages were flooded with scathing comments about how he'd mistreated me. Part of me felt bad as they faced the consequences of their actions. No matter how cruel they'd been, I hadn't wished such misfortune on them. But I also recognized this was their own karma, coming full circle. They'd tried manipulating me in my own home. Now they were the ones feeling powerless and adrift. Oddly, I found myself almost missing the daily drama and confrontation. The empty stillness of the house without Caleb was jarring. Building something from scratch had sounded energizing at first. Now the unknown path ahead seemed daunting. An unexpected knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts one quiet evening. I peered out cautiously. It was Lucy from the HOA. "Hey, Jenna, glad I caught you," she said warmly. "The neighborhood ladies were hoping you could come to our book club next week. We'd love to have you join us." I was touched by the gesture. "That's so kind of you. I'd love to come." As we chatted, Lucy gave me an update on the Caleb situation. She was on the HOA board for their new community as well, which had promptly evicted them after yet another dramatic run-in with security. I shook my head. Even completely uprooted, they hadn't changed their ways. At least I knew I'd made the right decision removing their toxicity from my life. Lucy and I soon fell into easy conversation. I realized how starved I'd been for friendship. I'd spent so long isolated, just trying to survive. Eventually, talk turned to my plans for the future. Lucy's eyes lit up as I hesitantly mentioned wanting to start a support group for women escaping toxic or abusive relationships. "Jenna, that's an amazing idea. You could help so many people who feel alone like you did," she said enthusiastically. Her encouragement filled me with renewed purpose. I dreamed of a sanctuary where people supported each other, not competed or controlled. Now I could create that myself. When book club night arrived, I entered Lucy's home with nervous anticipation. But the ladies welcomed me warmly, treating me as one of their own immediately. As we discussed the novel, one woman confided about leaving her critical, dismissive husband. Another described setting boundaries against intrusive in-laws. Their stories resonated all too well. Then they turned to me, listening intently as I shared a brief version of my own saga. The compassion and solidarity in their responses overwhelmed me. These virtual strangers had shown me more care and respect in one evening than Caleb's family had in months. I realized this must be what true community felt like. In that moment, my vision for the support group crystallized. I could channel my painful experience into helping build connections and strength. After book club, Lucy walked me out. "You're always welcome here," she said, squeezing my shoulder. I thanked her, wiping away a stray tear. Then I took a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in forever, it felt like home. Seasons changed, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My support group flourished, becoming a refuge for people healing from toxic relationships. Members celebrated victories, offered empathy for setbacks, and found strength in shared wisdom. Watching them bloom gave me a profound sense of purpose. I was determined to nurture this community so that no one else had to face hardship alone. With Caleb and his parents fading into a distant nightmare, I felt ready to start fresh. Lucy set me up on a few dates, which helped me remember laughter and romance. One night after a meetup with Andrew, a charming accountant, I came home to find Caleb sitting on my front steps. I froze, old anxieties flooding back at the sight of him. He stood up slowly, hands raised in a conciliatory gesture. "Hey, Jenna. I just wanted to talk, clear the air." Every instinct told me to turn him away, but he looked so haggard and defeated. I decided to at least hear him out. I crossed my arms. "Say what you came here to say." Caleb shuffled his feet, avoiding eye contact. "I messed up. I know that now. I was selfish and blind, and you have every right to hate me." His raw honesty surprised me. The old Caleb never would have admitted fault. "I let my parents manipulate me, and I tried doing the same to you." His voice broke. "You didn't deserve that. I'm so sorry." Part of me softened, seeing this remorseful, humbled man in place of the hostile stranger from before, but I couldn't erase the damage done. "You put me through hell," I said bluntly. "Your parents treated me horribly, and you enabled them. An apology doesn't change that." Caleb nodded, looking resigned. "You're absolutely right. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just hope someday you can find peace." He turned to leave. I thought of Andrew's warmth and support, the possibility of a partnership based on trust. A clean slate waited for me, but closure was needed first. "Caleb, wait," I called after him. He looked back, wary but hopeful. I chose my words carefully. "I appreciate you taking accountability, and I wish you well, but our paths diverged long ago." Caleb managed a sad smile. "I understand. For what it's worth, I'll always regret how things ended with us. Thank you for hearing me out." As I watched him drive away, an astonishing sense of calm washed over me. That painful chapter had finally closed. Later at book club, I told the ladies about Caleb's apology. They congratulated me on finding closure while still upholding my boundaries. "You're free of that mess for good now," Lucy said, raising her wine glass. The others cheered in agreement. Their solidarity never failed to lift me up. I realized then that the home I'd tried creating with Caleb had been an illusion. My true home was here, among these people who embraced me fully. Over time, Caleb faded to a distant memory. Meanwhile, Andrew and I grew closer, bonding over long talks, easy affection, and my awful attempts at cooking. One night, as we cuddled watching TV, Andrew gestured around my cozy living room. "You've made such a beautiful home," he said. I squeezed his hand, smiling contentedly. This house represented my resilience and independence, but it was the community I'd built that made it feel complete.